Hey everyone, Gabe from the Spine Crackers podcast here, and I'm sure you missed me. Some of you may have noticed that I didn't get around to doing a video about the books that I read in April. And now it is the end of May, beginning of June, so I'm just going to do a video for April and May as a one, and then I'll be back on the monthly schedule. Apologies also if the audio is weird on this video. My computer updated and it's been giving me some trouble, so hopefully this sounds okay. So I've been in a reading slump, and I think there's a couple reasons for it. One, as I mentioned, I think in the last video that I did, reading update, I've been playing through the Dark Souls games. I played Dark Souls 1. I got it just sort of on a lark, because I knew, it's obviously a legendary sort of series, and I had not consciously avoided them, but had just sort of never played them for whatever reason, and was just like, sure, let's do it. Looking for something to do, why not? And loved it, fell in love with it, fully hooked. Like went out, because I played it on the Switch, the remastered Dark Souls 1. I had played Demon Souls way back in the day, but it didn't quite stick with me in the same way. And I became fully enthralled. Like went out, got a PlayStation 4, immediately started Dark Souls 2, got through that, started a second playthrough of both. I'm currently about halfway through Bloodborne, so this is going to be the summer of Souls. I'm going to play through all the games up to Elden Ring, and then start that. Now, this has, of course, cut into my reading time. So since April, I've read 11 books. So it's like 5.5 a month, which is still, fine as a pace, but much slower than some of my other months, if you've been watching these videos. But, I mean, the Dark Souls games, I'm not going to talk about it a lot. This isn't a video game channel yet. Although if you like the Dark Souls, I think Matt and I are planning to do some Patreon content, boss rankings, area rankings, things like that, just because we're both pretty passionate about them at this point. But and the Patreon link will be down below if you like the show or these videos or whatever. So the pace has slowed because of that, but these games have been so enthralling to me narratively, thematically, not just as gameplay experiences, that I consider it sort of, in terms of my just engagement and wider appreciation of art, I consider my time with them pretty well spent. So I'm not bummed about it or feeling tension or insecure about it or anything like that, but that has cut into my actual reading time. The other thing that's been happening is I have just been hating everything that I've read, more or less. And I'm soliciting advice from you, the viewers here, on what do you do when you're in a slump? You just can't find anything that clicks really for you, and you're trying book after book after book, and you just, I don't know, I've just felt sour. I've just felt sour about a lot of the books that I've been reading, and that's coming through on the actual podcast episodes, which we recorded, with a couple exceptions that I'll talk about. What do you do when you're feeling that way? What do you do when you can't find a book that clicks? Do you just plow through? Do you, I can't. This is a weakness in me personally that I'll just put out there, because I know some people will say, if you're not liking a book, just put it down, try something else. I cannot do that. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's that some sort of pseudo moralistic, religious sentiment on my part that I just have to finish a book if I've started it. I cannot DNF books. I just can't do it. So if that's your advice, then we're not going to see eye to eye. And it's not like I disagree with people who do that or think that they're doing something wrong or anything like that. I wish I could do it in a lot of ways, but I just can't. It eats at me. I have to finish the book if I start it. So do you just keep plowing through? Do you go back to a favorite author? Do you, what do you do when you're in a reading slump? Because I'm in a bit of a slump, and I would love to hear from you all how you approach that when you are kind of just not feeling it. Hopefully things turn around over the summer. I've got some good stuff hopefully lined up that I'm planning to read. But who knows? All right, so let's get into it. So like I said, there was 11 books. I'm not going to split them up by like specifics of which month I read them, but so I'll do the ones we did for the podcast first, because those, I won't talk about those as much because those episodes are already available, except for one. that we just recorded last night. So we have Toni Morrison's Beloved. This episode's already out there and available, although I don't think I uploaded it to YouTube yet. I'll have to do that this week. Loved it. Fantastic. Incredible. Not a lot to say about it. This was one of the bright spots for me recently in terms of my reading. I'll let you listen to the full episode to get my more complete thoughts. But incredible. It was my first time reading it. I somehow kind of had dodged it for my life previously somehow. Incredible, fantastic. Read it. It should be required reading for everybody. Certainly all Americans. Next up was Ted Chiang's collection Exhalation. Chiang obviously is sort of a hype science fiction author. Didn't like it at all. Again, that episode is out, and I'll let you listen to that. But I thought it was there's a couple stories in here that I liked, a couple ideas that I thought were interesting, but overall I thought very overhyped for me. Didn't enjoy it at all. Next up was Gerald Murnane's Barley Patch, which we had Sean from Travel Through Stories, who has a great YouTube channel here on YouTube. I'll link him below, on to discuss, and it was a really interesting great discussion about Murnane as a character, about his work, because this book is sort of about him and the process of writing, and although it's a fictional character, it's also kind of him, and so on and so forth. That said, I didn't really like this one that much either. I thought it was interesting, a lot of really interesting sort of ideas. It just didn't click for me. It didn't work, and again, all of the sort of deeper explanations and justifications for these opinions are going to be in the episodes themselves. So go check those out if you disagree or want to hear more fully my thoughts. This is something that's going to come out in some of these other books. Apologies for the lighting. I'm normally in the other room, but apparently I have a habit of, because this was my first Murnane, and there's a couple other firsts to come later that I didn't like. And apparently I have a habit of, when I'm encountering a new author for the first time, picking what people who know that author would say is like their worst book. I don't know if I'm just unlucky or have bad intuitions about this sort of thing, or if it's cope on the part of the people who are fans of that author, and it's like, oh well, no, it's that one's bad, but all the other ones are good. Well, I don't know yet. We'll see. I want to read more Murnane and these other two examples of that phenomenon that happened to me these past couple months, but it's a strange pattern that seems to have been happening to me quite a bit recently. The next one up is John Wyndham's The Day of the Triffids. We had a W.A.S.T.E mailing list on the show for this, and that was a lot of fun too. If you don't know him, he has a great Instagram account. Recently got on YouTube as well. Is putting out really quality content, so that'll also be linked below. This was fun. I enjoyed this. This was my second, I think just the second Wyndham for me. And I think Wyndham is a really interesting writer. It's a sci-fi kind of apocalyptic story. Again, I'll refer you to the full episode. And the last one that we read for the show that we just recorded last night, and I do not have a physical copy of, is Tokyo Ueno Station by Miri Yu. And I won't spoil it because that episode is going to come out in a couple weeks, or in a week or so. Couple weeks. And yeah, interesting read. Didn't hate it, didn't love it, but it's certainly worth your time if it's something that you might be interested in. It's sort of related to Beloved in certain ways. It's sort of a ghost story that has implications for sort of national trauma and history, and the way that those things stack and layer on top of one another as expressed within individual lives. Really interesting. Again, I won't spoil it. Okay, now to the stuff that I read just on my own. I read two of these little Penguin Monarchs series, biographies of the monarchs of England, just because I was, my wife and I have been watching The Last Kingdom, which is a show about the early history of England before it was even England, and the sort of struggle for it to become England and a united, singular country. And I just sort of realized I don't really know anything about that time period in history, and the early sort of history of the British monarchs. Like, I mean, I know a couple names and stuff like that, but I really don't know much about the context or the details of the history. And so I stumbled across these not really great little, and they're doing one for, or they have already. I'm not sure. I think these are still coming out for all of the British monarchs on the back here, starting with Ethelstan, who they is the first one that they're starting with, and they say is the first king of England. Of course, there was Alfred the Great, who was kind of the king of the Saxons and was pursuing uniting England, but he was never king of the full united land. And I think these are really, really cool. They're short, 120, 100 pages. I mean, some of them are less. I think this one on William the Conqueror is like 85 pages or something like that. So really quick reads. I have a couple more that I'm going to read hopefully soon. And they're really well done. Historically rigorous. They have a lot of sort of additional reading suggestions, bibliographies, some cool, images and of art and carvings and paintings and whatnot. So really enjoyable little reads if you're interested in that sort of thing at all, but maybe not necessarily wanting to dive into like an academic text on it. These are great. So I'm gonna keep reading these, and I was enjoying my time with them. The next one is Richard Brautigan's In Watermelon Sugar. This is my first encounter with Brautigan, and I thought it was interesting. I enjoyed it. I think this was probably one of the ones that I enjoyed more on this sort of crop of books. Very kind of, obviously Brautigan is associated with the sort of hippie generation and the drug culture and that sort of thing, and there's a lot of potentially like oblique references to drugs and drug use, and it's sort of a post-apocalyptic story of these people who live in a sort of commune type area, and they build everything out of watermelon sugar and a few other materials basically. And it's sort of the story of kind of like civilizational breakdown or some to a degree, because there's this kind of other guy who leaves the community and kind of starts his own smaller community of dissenters, and they seem to think that there's a second apocalypse coming, and it's never exactly clear what the first one was or if it really was like an apocalypse or whatever, but there's heavily implied that there's this huge ruin essentially of some past civilization that it's so big they can't even explore it all. They don't even really go in there that much, and this breakaway group is sort of more interested in that, and they go in there and they dig around and they find all these old artifacts, and then there's a little like a love triangle type story going on in there, and it's really just unique, which was refreshing to me. Brautigan's style, and I want to read what's his most famous book? I can't remember off the top of my head, but I do want to read more of his work. I just picked this one up just because it's here was my strategy a little bit being in a slump. I was like a bunch of trying to get through some shorter books quickly and hoping some of them clicked for me and kind of brought me back from the slump, and it worked to a degree. I liked some of them pretty well, including this one. It was almost it how do I describe it? I mean, maybe I should do a full review at some point, but his style is very not musical, but it flows in its own sort of unique way, and he comes up with some really striking images and striking sort of ideas that I really enjoyed. It was almost a little bit too ethereal for me, almost a little bit too airy. It just moves so quickly and it's so short, and I mean, like there's this will be just like, let me find a good example. it's like a lot of just this kind of stuff. Like that's a chapter, and it just goes really, really, quickly. And I almost wanted something a little bit more to really grasp onto with this one. But that said, I really enjoyed the writing, and I think I'll definitely be returning to Brautigan in the future. Someone else who I will be returning to in the future is Dennis Johnson. I read Jesus' Son, the collection of short stories that I think people on there's a few people on the Discord, the Spine Crackers Discord, which you can get access to if you join the Patreon and all that. It's a lot of fun. But at least a couple people on there have been reading Dennis Johnson and enjoying it immensely. And so I thought I'd give it a shot. Again, it's slim volume, pretty quick to work through, and these were really good for the most part. Some of them more so than others, but it's like, really just vignettes, portraits of sort of American poverty and the American underclasses and the ways in which that sort of affects people's psychology and ways of looking at the world, and the tragedy and the trauma. It's sort of, it's sort of like Bruce Springsteen in his darker moments, but even darker than that, right? 15 times darker than that. And I'm a big Springsteen fan, and I'm not taking feedback on that opinion at this time. But if you're not a Springsteen fan, then you're mistaken. And so that really resonated with me, and I really think that Johnson hits on, and because some of the stories, they're not like explicitly interconnected, but some characters reappear and some places reappear, like a certain bar or places that people work, or things like that. And but it's not like a continuous narrative, right? It's still, so it's you could, I guess you could talk about like the Johnson expanded universe. But yeah, some absolutely crushing stories and images, and really just beautiful and brutal, and yeah, I want to return to his work. I will say the first story I thought was was the weakest one, which was unfortunate, because I was like, oh man, like I want to like this. I hope this isn't bad, but it gets a lot better from there, and a lot of the later stories are really really incredible. I've heard that his other work doesn't quite stack up to this, which is a bummer, but that's, I'm sure, people disagree about that claim. So if you've read Johnson, or have thoughts on this book or any of his other work specifically, drop a comment and let me know what to expect, or maybe where to go next. Because yeah, I really like this. This was a highlight as well. Okay, now we get to the spicy stuff, the spicy opinions. So the next book that I read was Karl Ove Knausgaard's Winter. This was my first encounter with Knausgaard. Again, there's the thing. I'd pick maybe a weird book to start with, or not one of their better books, or whatever. Hated this. Thought it was really, really bad. This is, for those of you who don't know, the Seasons series is sort of like, at least from my understanding, I don't know if they're all framed in this specific way, but they're not really like linear narratives or anything like that. They're sort of collections of, in this case, letters to his, at the beginning, unborn, and then later newborn daughter, just sort of musing on life and reflecting on a variety of topics. And I thought that there were some moments in the book that were powerful and sort of poignant, thinking about being a parent, about aging, and sort of the ways that individuals and societies can change. But overall, it was just like the Carl vibe at Power Hour. It was just him talking about whatever. They're basically like little mini essays that are just, here's what I think on this topic. And maybe this is, I just don't think Knausgaard has interesting enough ideas to sustain that even for a book of this length, let alone four, which is like how many are in this cycle. A lot of the stuff, and he goes off talking about like science and stars and stuff that's just he's not equipped to talk about it in any kind of interesting way, in my opinion. He doesn't. He's not a particularly adept philosopher or social critic, at least in this book. And so, just reading him muse in an undirected way on these disparate topics um, was just boring as hell, and not worth the time. As I said, there's a few moments that are of sort of personal reflection on his own life, or his sort of moments that have stuck out to him over the years that he remembers, or things that he hopes for his daughter, or whatever. And some of those are interesting and nice, and as I say, sort of poignant. But those are few and far between. The boring, just I don't use this word often when I discuss books, because I think it's overused and oftentimes unfairly used, and probably not descriptively apt, but just masturbatory in the worst way. So not a fan of this. If there's somewhere else that I can go with Knausgaard, because I have Autumn, which is another one in the series. I don't have the other two. But this was not did not encourage me to move on to that one. So if there's another direction that I can go with Knausgaard, let me know. I'm not particularly interested in diving into my struggle at this point, just because it feels like a project. Although maybe that's a false impression on my part. Maybe you can just kind of read one volume and put it down and come back to it a couple years later or whatever. I don't know. I don't really know how it works as a piece, as a full work. So let me know. Let me know where else to go with Knausgaard, because first impression was deeply negative. Uh, Similarly, sadly for me, was my experience with William Vollmann's The Ice Shirt. This is my first Vollmann, and hated it. Absolutely hated it. I thought it was a, and this is another phrase that I don't like to use too often, but when it is appropriate, I think it is fair to use. This is just a, and I worry that this is the case for the entire Seven Dreams series. This is, as I said, my first Vollmann. Maybe a bad place to start, but an intellectual and literary experiment held on to for way past its expiration date. It just is so like, for people who don't know, this is sort of like a pseudo historical fictionalized account of the kind of Vikings and the discovery of Greenland, and like upper northeastern Canada and that sort of thing, and eventually they start to move down the East Coast further. They have some interactions with Native Americans, and so on and so forth, and it takes place over generations. And then interspersed there are some of Vollmann's own, like, sort of pseudo journalistic experiences in Iceland, I think. And I read this back at the beginning of April, so if the details are a little fuzzy, forgive me. And it's sort of very, like, there's a lot of mythological stuff going on, and he incorporates a lot of what I imagine to be pretty historically accurate. He seems to be someone who does his research fairly robustly. There's like a glossary at the end, and references and timelines and things like that, and so he seems to be thorough and interested in getting things right, in terms of the history and that sort of thing. But it's just too long. It's just too long, and it's not interesting enough to be sustained. And I think the writing is really uneven. There's some beautiful passages of sort of descriptions of nature and things like that, but it after a point, it just sort of becomes like an Old Testament slog, like X begat Y, begat Z, begat A, begat B, begat C, and on and on and on and on. And it just drags. And I think Vollmann thinks that he's doing something much more interesting than he's actually doing in this book. And it just it felt clear to me reading it that the book was much more for Vollmann than for any reader to get anything out of. And if any reader does get anything out of it, it's more or less accidental. Um, that he didn't particularly care much about that. And so that's why I say it's just sort of an exercise or experiment gone on way too long. Um, so I was very disappointed with this and very discouraged from continuing on with Vollmann. So again, I know he's hot right now in the online literary scene. Uh, so if there's somewhere I should go from here, I've heard some of the other books in the Dreams series are not like this. Again, if I just randomly picked an anomaly of a bad book, I guess that's on me. But yeah, I thought this book was very bad. Um, and that's it. So apologies for it being sort of a negative end there with those last two, but I wasn't kidding when I said I was in a slump. Uh, and so I any help on offer from you, the audience, would be much appreciated in terms of where to go next with some of these authors that I had these didn't enjoy my first encounters with, or other approaches that you have to breaking out of that kind of reading slump. And yeah, I will be back at the end of June with another video, hopefully with some more positive things to say about some more books. And if you like the show, if you like these videos, you can always head on over to the Patreon. We have more stuff over there. Matt and Paul just posted a really funny video of, well, I won't spoil it. And join the Discord, get the full episodes, all that stuff. Excuse me. I will. Got to get one of those in every time I speak on camera for some reason, apparently. I'll see you next month. Thanks very much for watching. Bye.